What's up, guys? It's David Piatek and Lourdes Fernando with VA Housing Education. Today, we're going to be talking about, is it the right time to buy? There's going to be a couple things that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the current economic landscape and kind of what that looks like. We're going to break down some of the housing market and the interest rates and what experts are saying, but experts are often wrong in these cases. So we're going to kind of dive into that. And then some of the key considerations for veterans when it comes to home ownership. I know that we do a lot of that on the channel and do a lot of videos around it. But it's a good way for you guys to ask questions. So if you have them, make sure you drop them down in the comment section. We're happy to spend time and answer those things. And then we're also going to talk about the hidden winter real estate opportunities. It's one of my favorite times to buy. It can be challenging, but we're going to break that down. Because again, there's a lot of opportunity that's coming up right now as we kind of end October. Lourdes, it's I can't believe it's almost November next. It's almost Veterans Day. Can you believe it?
It's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's just been it's been a wild year this year with kind of with inflation and them trying to control it, and then also just things and other factors like the Fed funds dropping the rate. So let's kind of like dive right into these subjects because we want to give you guys as much information as possible. So one of the impacts that inflation has is in a couple different pieces, right? So one, it's going to be the overall cost of goods around you, right? Because I know grocery bills have gone up. I look at when I go shopping nowadays, I'm like, what is going on here? But then that translates also to housing because other people's properties are also appreciating at the same rate. It's kind of tough to outpace that because if you sell your house and make, let's say you sell it for 500,000, you're not like going into another market normally and buying it for 300, right? You're normally either paying that much or more, and it's somewhat limited inventory. So inflation plays a key role in today's actually at any time just plays a key role in how much you can afford and what you can't afford. So and Lourdes, how does that impact housing prices from what you've seen?
From what I've seen, I honestly thought that, with the interest rates being so high that the prices were going to go down. But I
Right.
really didn't see too much of that. Now, in certain areas, I have seen a decline as far as purchase price and days on market. But other areas are still really, really hot. So it just really depends on the area that you're looking in, whether it's going to go either which way.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky, and it's really based on the area because some areas I'm seeing price drops and other areas I'm seeing like after the listed price increases. I'm like,
Yeah.
what's going on directly
Mhm.
there, right? And let's talk a little bit about something that we get questions about all the time, which is the Fed has dropped the interest rate, but why are rates continuing to go up, right? And even
Mhm.
today, and right now in the last 2 weeks, it's kind of been out of control, but it's kind of just stabilizing itself, and it'll all be fine. So I want to is that the Fed funds rate is the overnight rate banks use to lend to each other. So in theory, the money is cheaper to borrow, right? But what people don't realize is that back in 2020, 2021, when we had the COVID piece happen, the reason why the markets did so well is because everyone invested money into the stock markets because the government was buying all the mortgage-backed securities. So that was the big differentiator. So now, and like historically, if the Fed drops the Fed funds rates, the stock markets do better than the bond markets. So when that happens, people pull money out of bond markets into stock market, and now they need to make it more attractive for investors in the bond market in order to get them back in. They have to raise interest rates. So this is kind of like, I think, a holistic conversation because as we see them predict now that they're going to continue to drop the Fed funds rate, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think great in one sense, maybe the cost of car loans, short-term loans may go down. But remember, your CDs also go down with that, right? Your CD rates go down. And then on the flip side, then mortgage rates potentially could be going up. So it's just kind of like it's a give and take. And I'm sure, Lois, you can speak to a little bit. Like, oh, the thing that really triggered this was that in jobs report that came out, and that's why it just went up, up, and up. And one way that you can check it yourself is check the 10-year Treasury note and see what the Treasury note is doing, because typically that's where we're seeing it go. So today it was I just see the peaks going up and up, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, which is once again like the interest rates went down as soon as the Feds they announced that rate hike. We saw, I think maybe like a week or two before that, the anticipation. We saw the rates go down, and then it started to go up shortly after that, which was like really confusing. And we got excited. Everybody thought that the interest rates were going to continue to go down at that point. But as far as employment rates, that is something that it does affect the buyer overall. So as far as I know, and it can go both ways. So I was talking to one of my clients, and they made an additional $2 per hour, and that increased their pre-approval about $50,000, which was great. So that is great. But if they start to cut your hours or whatever the case might be, that can also decrease your pre-approval. So I do see it on that side. And David, have you seen anything as far as employment rates, just in general, affect pre-approvals or even this current market?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So we don't see as much of it. I would say, like, when I say that, it's like in the middle of a transaction or from pre-approval to buying or closing on your property, right? I haven't seen too. I mean, it's actually maybe once or twice in the last 2 years where maybe somebody had a reduction in hours, may have not qualified for a home loan, or lost their job, right? We've seen, yeah, again, only just a couple of times we've seen that happen, but normally we've seen people be able to bounce back from that. I think when COVID was going on, it was tough because some industries thrived like crazy, while other industries, restaurants, but still, there's a lot of companies that closed their doors, impacting people being able to obtain a home ownership. And also, you have what happened here in the last with the hurricanes, right? Especially up in North Carolina. It's more relevant there because they normally don't have hurricanes. They're not like Florida, where it's like, hey, we're ready. Yeah, everything, like, we have everything in place. We've done this. When it
Mm.
happens to an area that just they don't have, that this is unheard of to happen, you have a big impact both on housing and people being able to qualify. And plus, if those homes were destroyed, you have another piece separate to that. So, yeah, it just causes a lot of it can cause a lot of issues. But that's why I think we always talk about make sure that you're budgeting for home ownership, that in the event something were to happen, you have extra money saved up. And I know it's easier said than done, but you really have to focus on that piece. And then that's like another component to that as well, is that you're looking at new construction and housing supply, right? This is what in your mind, Lourdes, where in general, right? You're not going to see specific on markets because I think in major cities, I'm sure it's trending somewhat the same. What do you feel like the housing supply right now going into November, into the wintertime? Like, what normally happens?
Yeah, so during the winter months, it's a little bit different. Just depends on the area that you're in. So if there's elements like snow, if there's elements like snow, really really cold, bitter weather, it does slow a lot of people down. A lot of people say, I don't want to move during January and a snowstorm type of thing. It's so in certain areas like the Midwest where we do get those elements, it is typically a little bit slower during the winter months. Now, during COVID, that was probably the only exception that, the interest rates being so low that, we were busy the entire year. So that was the only time that we did see something like that happen, where the climate really took an effect.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's what I think, like, what this is all about, what we're talking about today, which we're definitely going to cover down more strategies a little bit later, because like I say, this is like my favorite time of the year to utilize the VA home loan because it's amazing. And so I'm pulling up right now. The VA provides statistics on how many VA home loans have closed. Okay, so I'm gonna pull these up myself between November, February, and March. Okay, so this will give me a good gauge to let you guys know, kind of like, how many veterans are actually buying during this time. So you guys know yourself, because sometimes people are like, we're not doing anything. Okay, so last year in November, 28,628 VA home loans were done. Okay, that's a huge number. In December, there was 25,290 VA home loans. In January, that it was, let me see what this was, 3,137.
Wow.
It's a huge difference, right? And this is all public information. And then if you go into like the other months, it kind of stabilizes around that 25,000 ish, right? So it really goes strong. And so when you talk about opportunity, and you think about only 3,100 people bought, but yet there's still a lot of supply on there, that's when you're thinking, how do I get a deal? But again, we're going to talk about some of those strategies here in a little bit. But a big factor too, Loris, is consumer spending when it comes to the economy. And everything we talk about right now is really my opinion, because it's tricky, because if you ever, like, Loris, when we're watching stuff like, oh, the consumer spending index is lower, or they're higher, that's not good for the consumer. You should be saving and not spending money if you can't, right? You should be trying to save as much as possible. But everybody else wants you to spend all your money so they can make money and you have no money, right? That's kind of a reality of the situation, but it's also how the hamster wheel works, right? It's just a circle of life until you can break free from that. And I'll tell you, Lourdes, I don't know how I want your opinion on this, is that, when we look at people's financials, because that's what we do a lot of. So if you guys want to schedule a call with us, please do. Happy to kind of go over what your situation is. A lot of times people have the ability to obtain home ownership and use that beautiful VA home loan if they would budget and they wouldn't spend too much money. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, it's a little hard right now, David, because, things are a lot more expensive. Now, even with the interest rates, your mortgage payment's a lot more expensive. Rent has skyrocketed over 22%. So there is a lot of factors that are going in, which I see on my end. It's harder to save. Whereas before, it was a lot easier, when gas was cheaper, when food was cheaper. So considering those things and today's market is something that is very important. And I know both of us are taking budgeting classes right now on how to teach and explain this to the everyday consumer. How can
Right.
you break it down? So the biggest thing is coming up with that budget. Is that everything that I always talk to with my clients is, let's set a budget, and how much do you feel comfortable considering, your expenses, considering any type of debt that you have, considering, how much you spend on groceries, like really getting down to the details of what you're spending your money on, so that we can come up with a good budget that would make you feel comfortable and moving forward.
Yeah, and then, you know what, Lawrence, we should probably do a video with somebody that specializes in helping people cut down costs. Now, and there's there's big grocery chain stores that you pay a pretty hefty premium, okay? But you go to other grocery stores where it's not even close. Like, you're like, how is this same item 69 cents a pound versus $4.99? Okay, so it's also where you shop makes a big
Yeah.
difference, right?
Yeah.
And the restaurants you go to, and if you do like those bulk stores like a Costco or Sam's Club, all that's going to be a factor into that piece. Now let's
Right.
talk about the housing market overall, and this is going to be primarily pertaining to a combination of weather related, kind of where we at stats. I'll talk about a little bit the loan limits. Questions, drop them down in the comment section. Happy to answer them. Lourdes, talk to us about what happens in this specific market with lower inventory, like going
Yeah.
into the
So
winter time.
Going into
right?
the
Big
winter time.
difference.
Yeah. So right now we are still at a very low inventory. We're at less than 2 months, and that's still considered a seller's market. There's not that much inventory out there right now. So, there's fewer homes available. We can see, like I said, certain areas, there's still um, multiple offers because there's not that much inventory. And a lot of people, they want to go into the same areas as everybody else.
Right.
So we still are seeing those issues. And we did talk about the seasonal slowdowns as well, as far as, winter, so we had mentioned that. And, in other areas too, I am seeing longer market times, meaning
Okay.
it's on the market for a very long time. And in these areas, you can pick and choose when they're on the market a little bit longer. Then ideally, sometimes you can get better, maybe you get closing costs added to that, and better terms, a lower price, things like that. So all those things are very important for you to understand what that specific market is. And are we coming towards, is this an area, or is this a season where the prices likely are going to go down?
Yeah, and that's it's a good point because it is so based on an area, right? Some places have low inventory because nobody wants to leave the area. And when a place
Yeah,
does list, it like I see it because then
I
like
saw.
people go way over the list price because they just want to be in that area or whatever, right? And then then that's a positive thing. Hey, you have limited inventory, there's a reason for it. And then the opposite where hey, there's been a lot of inventory, maybe an economic impact for an area, and then affordable, and then the kind of like, yeah, if there's, you can then kind of wheel and deal. But I've seen people try to wheel and deal on properties that have been listed for a long time, and guess what? They're moving nowhere. So, um, let's talk about one thing that you can control is talking about when you're going to make an offer on a property, making sure that you're actually qualified to the best extent to
Yeah.
buy a property. All right. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And Loris, I want you to talk about like what impact that has when you make an offer. Okay. So when we talk with clients to go over their finances for generating, hey, are you actually qualified to use the VA home loan? Number one, it's a lot of paperwork. You have to submit your tax returns, your pay stubs, your bank statements, everything that is required for a review of your loan. Because what you want is you don't want any surprises. Loris, I know this happens to you because you'll call me on a Saturday at like 9 p.m. and be like, hey, like we just found out that, or that the client's not qualified or they got denied for their loan. You're closing in a week or two. Hey, can you jump in and help? A lot of times we can fix it, but that's just because we have the knowledge and we normally have to work with. We do a lot of that thanks to a lot of people on YouTube. Like, hey, can we get your help? Yes, we
Mhm.
can. We've
Yeah.
had a lot of success stories with it. And sometimes veterans shouldn't have been pre-approved in the first place because of their finances. But again, we have a lot of videos around that, and you can always get to home ownership. It's just a process that you go through. So never shy away from it. And denial is not just a river in Egypt, as we used to say when I was in school, right? It's like you really have to own up to it and really move forward with it and submit all your documents, have a real credit check, get your certificate of eligibility. Lender could do it for you. But when you know what your max payment you qualify for, that's going to correlate to the price point. But Laura, it's like, what has been your experience when people get lottie dottie pre-approvals?
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, you get phone calls late at night. That's what happens. But yeah, it's very important. Even part of. I mean, I know I'm not anything with lending, and I'm not a lender or anything like that, but I do constantly keep in communication with my client. And there's been some times too where they say, oh, yeah, I got this pre approval, but they tell me a disqualifying, factor. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Hey, I only served 4 years out of the 6 years of the reserves, blah blah blah, where the case might be. I'm like, do you qualify? Like,
Right.
so it's important to get that full pre-approval and to really understand if you're actually qualified. So if you're not, then we have to scramble to see if you are. And it's better. And I remember somebody was like, oh, David asked for all this documentation. My other one did it. And I'm like, that's going to be a problem. Like, you should give all your
Right.
documentation so that you know that you're fully qualified, so that we're not, getting ready to close. Your file goes to the final underwriter and then we have an issue. So, so it's very important for you to have all your documentation and have communication with your lender and just say, hey, am I qualified? Once you get that pre-approval, oftentimes I don't ask people what is their pre-approval for. I ask what their budget, what they're comfortable spending. So
Right.
that's something that you also have to consider is what's your comfortable spending, monthly spending. Is this going to be too much? Are you going to be house poor? Is there
Right.
opportunity for you to rent out the basement if that, all comes, if it comes down to that, just so that you can help offset some of your payments. So, and all of us are banking on, when the interest rates go lower, refinancing. And there has been some refinances during, like a month ago, maybe.
But yeah, it was
Been
like short lived because if you didn't
short
lock, there's
lived,
nothing you can do.
short lived. So a lot of people are banking on that. But until you get to that point, you have to be comfortable with these monthly payments, because everything goes up. Taxes go up, food's going up, gas is going up. All these things are very important, and you don't want to be like how I was in my very first home. Well, my second home, we were really, really cash poor because all of
Yeah.
that was going in. Our taxes increased, and it was just not a very comfortable situation.
Right. And I'll kind of like drop something in there. This is why also important if you have put off your filing for EV disability and I would definitely talk to somebody. I was at an event recently and I'll share one story where a veteran was like, got shot in the head, Purple Heart recipient, never filed for disability. He's like, oh, there's nothing wrong. And I'm thinking to myself, like, there may be nothing wrong, right? I'm not saying there's something wrong with you, but I'm
Yeah.
saying that go and have it evaluated because there's a lot of states and counties offer tax advantages if you have a service connection, and probably the not saddest thing I see is that veterans don't go doing it. Something happens to them. Now their benefits don't pass on to their spouse, and their spouse may not be working. So there's just like all those like indemnity compensation piece
Yeah.
to it. So that's just kind of a side note as we're talking about this, because other veterans. That's what a lot of people think. They've already allotted that money for that. So I will stop at that. Where you have in this market, I would say an advantage when things are slowing down. It's not as, I would say, as stressful. Things become stressful when you find the house you like and you have multiple offers, right? Because that's the thing. Like, it just takes time to do it. But like, take advantage of this slower time we're going into, right? If you've thought about it and you're like, hey, I know financially I can make it happen, because if you're waiting for values to drop and rates drop, it doesn't make it to me. Let's just be honest, values will go up anyways, and you're not saving any money. I'm gonna be doing a whole video around that here this week. But Lourdes, do you see values dropping 30, 40, 50%? What would
That
cause that?
not okay. So not 50, no, not definitely not 50%. Maybe sometimes at 10%. So it just depends. So
Yeah.
even recommendations are given within the first 30 days if we are not, we're not under contract to drop the price. And of course, we look at what's in the area. So it's all relative to the comparables. So just making sure that you're on top of it.
Yeah.
If you're not getting the showing request, then likely you're overpriced. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. So when I'm talking to my sellers, we're constantly watching the market. We're seeing what's going on. We're seeing other properties, like, are they getting, under contract, and, how does that property compare to yours? So that is something that, we look for. And on the buy side, we do look to see how long it's been on market, seeing any type of like price changes since, since the property, how motivated is the seller?
Yeah, and that's a big. Sometimes they're not very motivated, and they're selling their place. And I'm like, why are they listing the property? But another thing I see, Lourdes, is like I see things in waves too, where house has no interest, no offers, nothing. Then the client's like, I'm interested in buying this, and then all of a sudden there's like another offer that comes in out of nowhere. It seems like that every single time, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. All right, so in this slower market too, like normally condos, I would say during this time kind of slow down a bit as well. And for a lot of veterans that don't know that condos do require VA condo approval. And it is, and Lourdes, I want you to attest to it, is that it is one of the easiest things to do out there. And literally a veteran can buy any condo that they want with a waiver. It
Yep.
is not rocket science. And Lourdes, maybe share a story if you have one about one that we've helped that that could not believe, like they were told no multiple times, and then it was able to happen, and it was quick. So why don't you share a story with that?
Yeah. So I always ask, especially if clients, they have their lenders and I just say, just make sure that they understand and they know how to apply for a waiver. And if the answer is, or ask them, have they ever, received a condo waiver approval, then that's a good sign. If they haven't, it's bad. Some people don't know how to do that. They don't know how to file very, very simple forms. And then they come back and they ask me, hey, how do I do this? You said you could do it and you've done it. I was like, yeah, but I don't know how to do a lender's job. So
Right.
it's very important that your team has the proper knowledge, especially since the lender is the one that has to submit this over. So it's imperative that the lender knows how to submit for a waiver. It's super easy. If done correctly, like within less than a week, you're good to go. If done improperly, it can take over a month for approval. So it's very, very important to know what they need, getting this documents in a timely manner, submitting it, following up, and moving forward. And if you don't know what you're doing, just let your clients know. If your lender don't know what you're doing, then just send it to someone that does, because on our end, like I said, I've seen with someone that knows how to do it, a very, very quick turnaround time versus
Right.
someone who does it over a month, or I end up calling you and
Yeah, no.
having you help me. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing, guys. It's like the moral of the story is like we've done. There's other videos on the channel around condos and how we do them. So don't get stuck with some of these companies that one charge you a ton in fees. Because remember, if you reached out to a company because of marketing, you are paying for it, right? There's nothing that's free in life. So let's talk about a little bit about I would say like a benefit of the VA home loan and kind of comparing it to some other loan programs that exist, because veterans do, Lourdes, we know we've seen this, and either one loan officer is not knowing the information on a VA loan, and they may have a somebody sell their property. And I know somebody commented that using the second time the VA home loan, yes, it's an awesome program. But sometimes that misinformation or lender giving you wrong advice ends up hurting you financially, and you may not know about it until you're watching a video like this, and you're like, "Oh man, this happened to me," and I know it happened to you, Lourdes. I know we've talked about it a lot. And like that's the thing, is that the program itself for the V loan, it's a lot more affordable than other programs, because typically you have lower rates, no private mortgage insurance, no money down. You can qualify for the property tax waivers. There's a lot of good parts to that. And so, yeah. And then when it comes to rates themselves and buying down rates, I mean, what's your thought on that? Like, I'll give my thought after yours.
Oh, um, it just depends. Right now, the interest rates are really high, and if they go down even lower, you pay all this money up front for a buy down. and then you're just going to refinance anyways when the interest rates go lower. I
Right.
feel that like it's not going to be that wise to do so. So it just depends. If you absolutely need it to qualify, then great. But just, when you do refinance, it is going to cost you that same
To
amount
refi again. Yeah.
to refi again. So it's just kind of like a double the cost. What is
Yeah.
your insight on that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you that I just meet too many veterans that get steered away from their VA home loan. One,
Mm.
right? So really, if you're buying big discounts and origination fees, you're most likely working with someone that markets to you all the time. Hands down. That's what we see all the time. I'm like, how could they be charging you that much? And the veterans just love giving money away, by the way, Lourdes. Like it's unreal. Like they just overpay. Like I'm not even going to go into it because I get so frustrated with it.
I
But
was a victim, David. First of
yeah,
all,
I know,
I don't love giving money
but
away.
it's
I
so
just
mind
did
blowing
not
that this happens
understand.
today. I know, but like, I don't know how many times, I don't know if we have to become more blunt about what we talk about so people just can get it and be like, actually could save. I think I did the numbers. Like on average, veterans get overcharged over $40 million a month in fees. Like you don't need that. I'm still having a hard time like swallowing that because like if you want to give me extra $40 million a month, I would be a happy camper, right? But I think it's just ridiculous. But
Mm.
one thing that we do see is veterans get steered away from their VA benefits into other programs, and I did a whole video on that as well. So based on like average price points, like 400,000, you basically pay an additional over 20,000 in extra fees by not using your VA home loan the first time. That's number one. So you really need to lock in, where your benefits are, understanding them. Watch the channel, watch the videos, subscribe, and if you want, schedule a call because we're happy to talk to you. And I'll tell you that people always like even today when I'm on phone calls with folks that reach out from online, they're like, "You're actually talking to me, right? You want to talk to Laura's? You guys could talk to her," and they have reached out, right? Um, and you just have to just be careful with that. What would you say, Laura, is like when you're going into the winter markets? When it comes to like negotiating price reductions, or was it more important to negotiate for a seller credit to cover closing costs? Kind of like what's the toss up between that?
What's the toss up? So it really depends on everybody's situation. So we show them what that looks like as far as how much is needed for closing and if they have that. So if they don't have that, obviously we are definitely going to go for that. Um, if they do, say for example, they only qualify for a certain amount and we do have to drop the price, then it's that. So it just really depends. So overall we look to see how much you're going to be saving per month for a $10,000 reduction, or is it better to get those closing costs at $10,000 paid for. So those are the two things that we're always looking at. Is it, is the monthly payment going to be that much of a difference, or that cash in your pocket? So when you're purchasing a home, you have a lot of expenses. You have to furnish the property when you get the
And
property.
tools. We did a whole video on tools. I
On
cannot
tool,
believe how
yeah.
much
Oh
I've
my god, I
spent for
can't believe
tools in
my
the
my
last
tool
couple months.
collection is so
Oh
big.
my
But anyway,
god.
yes, you got to buy the tools, you got to buy the furniture, and then you got to fix any type of repairs that are immediate repairs. So
Yep.
when you're walking through the property, and all this is money that's coming out, it's a lot. So you have to make a decision at that point. Is it better to keep the money, get the closing cost credit? Is that going to be more beneficial for me? Or is this, saving $15-20 a month? Is that going to be more beneficial for me? So it just really depends on the budget, cash on hand. Do you want to have more of that, and your overall situation?
Yeah. And some people may out there be like, well, if you roll closing costs into the loan, you're paying $10,000 over 30 years, you end up paying like $30,000. You got to kind of think of everyone's situation's different.
Yeah.
And how do I say this nicely? The longer you wait, you're paying more money for something. Like that's just historical. I'm not saying like this is fact, like, hey, values just go up all the time. They don't, because look at 2018. We've had multiple crashes, right? But right now, what we see is we don't have like fake like stated income, stated asset, no income, no asset loans, those just don't exist right now. Uh, in the like primary purchase, the investment properties they do, but for the primary markets. So we're not seeing like we're going to be seeing these huge shifts. Okay, we see a lot more consistency, and when we people rate for rates to drop, everybody else is doing the same thing. It drives the price. Look at the data. This consistently happens in
Mhm.
most major markets. Now, again, if you're living in a rural area, the impact's going to be a little bit different on you. And like Lourdes mentioned, there's times value sometimes will drop on that. And I'll
Yep.
touch one thing briefly because it's a conversation in itself. Is that technically, Lourdes, have you heard of what a 3-2-1 buy down is?
Yeah.
It's
And I, mhm.
you've heard. So let me explain a little bit because sometimes people are like, somebody's offering me a 3% interest rate right now, and I'm like, all right, tell me this great idea of yours. And it is a great idea, by the way. Okay, the idea, right? But it's also a real program. V loans and FHA loans offer these what are called buy downs, where the first year your interest rate's 3% lower than what the par rate is, meaning what the current rate is without costing you fees or you getting a credit, right? The par rate. So let's say, for example, educational purposes, the current rate's 6%. Well, they're going to say the first year it's going to be 3%, the second year it's going to be 4%, then it's going to be 5, then 6, okay? Or yeah, so or you do a 2-1 buy down, but the thing is that the seller has to pay for the interest difference, okay? That
Mhm.
is a um that has an impact because it makes you less competitive if you're asking for that. And we did have somebody ask a good question. Can you qualify for a down payment assistance program with a VA loan? Chris, thank you for that. So the answer is yes, you can. You can use a down payment assistance program with a VA loan. Not every program qualifies, as I've learned, because we've had some of them where they just won't qualify. The program itself won't qualify for a VA loan program, like a down payment.
Mhm.
There's pros and cons to down payment assistance programs for sure. That money, again, nothing's free in life. And normally they have a lot stricter requirements over the VA loan. So you may be able to be qualified for the VA loan without a down payment assistance program, where you will not be qualified with the down payment assistance program because of how the program works. Have you seen that, Lourdes?
Yeah, I would say there's so many programs out there, so definitely read the
Yeah.
the little print at the bottom. So understanding the pros and cons, is this a forgivable down payment assistance? Is there a time
What's
frame?
the time?
What
Yeah.
happens if I refinance this property in the next year when the interest rates go low? Am I going to be locked into this interest rate? Because a lot of them, you're going to be locked into these interest rates, or they're going to prorate it and you're going to pay that back. So
Right.
it is, for example, next year the interest rates go lower. You just purchased this year and it's at a 7%, and then it goes all the way down, hopefully to 4% next year. I'm praying. Okay. And that happens and you go to refinance, you're going to have to pay all that money back. So definitely look at the terms of these grants and just make sure that you fully understand that and you're using it if it makes sense for you to use them. If you're in an area where it's hard for you to get closing costs, because the down payment assistance programs will also aid in closing costs. So if that is the case, then it's a lot easier for you to get that assistance to cover closing costs. But if you're in an area where it's not that much competition and you don't need that down payment assistance, you know, wait it out.
Yeah, it's tricky because yeah, it's just there's the restrictions that come with it. And what if the money drives up before you close? You're banking on the program. Like I've seen it sliced all different ways.
Yeah.
But if you can qualify and it makes sense, cool. But definitely be cautious if you're like, I'm gonna rent this property in like a year or two, because normally you do have to pay that money back if it's not your primary residence anymore. So there are restrictions, and I'm a fan of knowing what can go wrong versus what can go right, because you got to know the downside of what you're doing on that. So Yeah, but that was a great question. Thank you for that. And I believe, I also did a video on just understanding the good, the bad, and the ugly of these down payment assistance programs. And if you have one you're interested in, I can review it for you. Just schedule a call down below. Now let's talk about some of the key considerations for veterans, and then we're going to go into our winter opportunities. And I'm going to share my personal story as well with you guys, and kind of like what I see. But like I've mentioned before, well, actually, no. Let's talk about property taxes. If you're a veteran that qualifies for a property tax exemption, because actually, right now is the time that you'd want to buy, and I'm going to explain it, and I'm going to have Lourdes also explain it because we both explain it a little bit different. All right, so this is how it works. If you're in a county that pays taxes current, like for example, Texas. So if you buy a house today, you make an appointment with the county like in a couple days or after you close, and then you go in, file your exemption, and then boom, you have your property tax exemption and you have it. But for a lot of other states, you will have the taxes are paid in arrears. So I'm going to give you guys an example. In 2024, like I'd say in Illinois, we're actually paying 2023 taxes. Okay. So in 2025 hits January 1st, we're actually paying 2024 property taxes. And it's relevant if you qualify for the disability waiver, because if you close before the end of the year in 24 in arrear state, taxes are paid in arrear, your exemption normally kicks in 2026. Okay. So you will still pay taxes for all of next year. That's for some people, knowing that they move on properties now, because if you close on January 1st, now you're not getting the exemption until 2027. So that's why it's important. And again, it varies by county, and it just kind of varies by area. And yes, you still have to pay those taxes. So those are things that you want to consider. If your situation is where you already own a home right now, and let's say you filed your VA disability 3 years ago and you just got awarded today, and if it was back filed 3 years ago and you've had the house for the last 3 years, you could potentially get a tax refund of that money. Okay, you have to go to your county, and everywhere it's different, right? Even in Florida, we do a lot of business. There'll be one county allows you up to 3 years, another one won't. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, with that piece. Lourdes, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, really understanding how it works. Unfortunately, going to the website's not going to help too much.
You got to call the assessor.
Yeah. So just really understanding, and we have done a video on property taxes. It's on our YouTube page to give you a little bit more, and that's specific to Illinois. So it just depends on where you're at, and understanding, if you have a multi-unit, is your entire building going to be exempt? No, it's not. It's going to be prorated to, if you have a lease more than 6 months in the entire year, or you're renting it out for more than 6 months, then you are going to have a proration of taxes for that building. If it's over $250,000 equalized assessed value.
With Illinois. Yeah.
With Illinois. Yeah. You may not, and that's not $250,000. That's $250,000 equalized assessed value, and it changes every single year. So it's roughly anywhere between 800 to 900, but it just depends on that specific year of, you're going to get that, part exempt. Now, some areas does 100% tax proration credit above that. And some other areas, if you're, a dollar over it, they're not going to grant you any type of exemption. So there's so many, there is so many little hidden details when it comes to if you qualify, if you don't qualify, how soon can you get this exemption? Do you have to pay right now, and why do you have to pay? So if you guys have any questions about that, you can reach out to either David or I, and we can get you a little bit more details on that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you, Lourdes. We had a question on here. What is the process to reinstate VA home loan if lost? Now, very important subject, because there's a couple things that this happens, and it's not necessarily what you think. Okay, so there's going to be the one that you think like, okay, hey, I purchased the property, I had a foreclosure or short sale, and a portion of my entitlement was locked out because the property went to foreclosure. Can I use my VA home loan again? Technically, yes. It just depends on how much entitlement was taken out. Then, if you had a property and let's say you kept that property, then your entitlement's locked into that property, but you can still use multiple VA loans. Now, normally I would need like a whole document so I can show you guys all the numbers. I have a whole video on that, so you can check out the channel, check it out. Now, let's just say it, and you can lose your VA loan by having a default SBA loan or default federal government debt. So keep that in mind. A lot of people don't know that and they get in trouble.
Oh.
But if you just had a regular, let's say, let me use an example. Let's say you bought a house for $200,000 with a VA loan, and that home went into foreclosure. The VA guarantees 25% of the loan. Okay, so basically, out of 200,000, they guaranteed $50,000. So you lose $50,000 of your entitlement. Now every time I say this, like I already feel people getting complicated, but it's based on the Freddie Mac single family loan limit. Okay, so in this example right now, just for example, it's 766,550. So in theory, you could buy a place for, oh man, there's less 755. Yeah, so like you still have like 500,000 left. I think it's been a long day, but you still have about 500,000 left of your benefit to use. Okay, but if you need more than that, then you would have to pay back the money to the VA. So what you would do is you would request your certificate of eligibility. You can go to the VA's website, va.gov. And I just did a whole video on understanding your eligibility and a certificate of eligibility. Two parts, right? Being eligible for the VA home loan and then getting your certificate of eligibility and understanding it, right? So watch those two videos. They'll give you a good idea of that. But typically, you're gonna have to just pay the VA the money you lost, your full benefits of that. So that was a long-winded answer, but yeah, definitely a key piece to that. But let's go into just kind of last piece, which is really the hidden gem of real estate. I'll share my personal stories that I bought a place last year in December. And the weather ended up being real nice. But what we see a lot of times during this time of the year, people selling. And tell me, Lois, what you see is that normally we see like either people passing away, estate sales, divorce situations, reloads, kind of like those are really highly motivated. Like that's what I see. Anyone really listing, mid-November through the holidays, like early January. Normally, it's kind of like I feel like you can get into a good deal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Once again, it just depends on the area.
Yep.
So some of the areas, yeah, no problem. And I know that people who are looking in the wintertime, they're a little bit more motivated. People who are selling in the wintertime are a little bit more motivated. So the motivation is very different compared to any other time. And I do think just because, it's, they have to heat these homes, pipes can bust, all kinds of
Yeah.
things can happen. So they want to offload it as quickly as they can. And so I do see the motivation. It's just a little bit more prominent in the winter time. I do see sometimes a little bit longer market times than in the past, or compared to any other time. You do have to realize too that during the winter time, people are in school, they're traveling. There's a lot that's going on. You have the holidays and what have you. So there's a lot going on, and to get certain things done to a property like a roof done or cement or concrete work, painting, all that stuff is really hard to do during the winter times. So some of the things, if it needs immediate repair, might not be an option for some people, because they're looking to move in. So we do see a lot more motivation. We also do see it's a little bit harder to do inspections during the winter time. I know we've had snow like fall all on top of a home, and trying to inspect the roof when there is like so much snow, it's a little bit harder to do and harder to evaluate during the winter months. So yeah, so that can cause a little bit more of a delay in the closing process as well.
Yeah. And I know we've been talking about should you buy in the wintertime, but and like some of the opportunities, but the opposite happens in warmer climates right now where people are like, wait a second, it's getting cold here. I want to move to somewhere warm like Florida or Arizona. So,
Yeah.
I just kind of realized that right now, like, because we're up north, so we're always cold. It's, I got people messaging me from Florida, like, is it snowing in Chicago yet? I'm like, it's going to be pretty soon because it was like 36 degrees not too long ago. Um, but you have the opposite thing in those warmer areas where those are maybe heating up right now, even though it's winter in the United States. Those hotter areas might be heating up right now where people may be selling here and moving down to warmer climates. So, I see a lot of like empty houses because people have either like moved out already. And then would you say that's, I guess double-edged sword. Are they really, that motivated to, they might be more motivated if the house is empty because they're just paying taxes and insurance on it, right? Or whatever, mortgage. So, but again, that's just something that, you kind of have to figure out because, I mean, have you seen that empty homes sell? I mean, I don't really know this stuff, but like empty homes sell better or faster or more motivated.
Yeah, so it just depends on the accessibility. So some people like to walk in and they like to envision everything there. So it's great to have a completely vacant home. And other people like to walk into homes and be like, oh, I can see that my queen size bed fits perfectly here. Look how they have it set up. So it's kind of like a double edged sword as far as, being able to see yourself in a property. Now, having the property vacant or easily accessible, meaning if you're a seller and the seller's allowing, 1 hour like showings and what have you. So as far as sellers, making sure that you're listing your home. Now, I'll tell you a quick story. Every time that I would list one of my personal residents and we've already sold 3 homes. So I've done this 3 times when I sold a home, but I would put the dogs and my in-laws in a hotel. Um, I would sleep on the couch. Everything was perfectly like staged very, very nicely. And I was gone out of the house the entire day. Like that's what I would do. Like every single time, just so that as many people can walk through the property. And usually we had no more than 7 days like market time. We staged it very, very nicely. We decluttered, we depersonalized, did all the things. And we have a video as well as far as like selling tips, which we did all those things. And it turned out like perfect because it's staged, it looks nice, it's clean. I'm putting the music on, candles are lit, like it is like a vibe. When they walk in there, they're like, yeah, this is my home. And it works every time. So whether if you have to go and it's completely vacant, just make sure it's clean. It looks really, really nice, fresh coat of paint. And if it has your furniture, just make sure you stage it properly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'm one of those no vision. I look and I'm like, I see nothing. But I see those people like, on HGTV and they're like, oh, they take this house and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be horrible. And I'm like, how did they make it look so nice? There was a house not too far from me that I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I would love to have this house, but it is so ugly. And it was like it was a great location. And I was looking the other night over the weekend. I'm like, oh, listed for sale. And I'm like, man, that house actually looks really good now. But again, but if somebody has the vision,
Yeah.
they can do it. I'm not one of those. You may be one of those, but I'm not that. So hopefully you guys got a lot of good information today. If you have questions, drop the comments below. Share our videos with anyone you know. This really applies to any veteran family out there that's thinking about home ownership. Um, Again, we're happy to help, and we can basically walk you through anything. Anything else to add to that, Lourdes?
Nope. Good to go.
All right. Well, you guys have a great evening, and we'll talk to you guys soon.